Hello, this is Brian. Today is Tuesday, September 20th, 2022. I'm here along the Big Laguna Trail here in Cleveland National Forest, Laguna Mountains, in central San Diego County, Southern California. Today it is time for a spotlight on plants. And today's spotlight is on the silver wormwood, aka silver mugwort, and it's this plant here, Artemisia ludoviciana, subspecies incompta. So Artemisia ludoviciana is the general species of silver wormwood or mugwort, and is found here in Southern California from foothills, higher foothills, mainly in the mountains down towards the desert. Now we have a couple of different subspecies. We have subspecies ludoviciana, we have subspecies incompta, and subspecies albula. We are going to talk about the mountain silver wormwood, and that is, again, Artemisia ludoviciana, subspecies incompta. So you might have potentially seen a video I did on the Douglas mugwort, Artemisia douglasiana, a close relative of this plant. If not, you can go check that video out, where I talk about that plant, which is a somewhat similar plant, but usually larger in stature. But ludoviciana is usually a slightly lower statured plant. Doesn't usually form quite as dense thickets, but does form quite nice large populations. It's covering a nice chunk of this trail side here into the understory of these oaks and pines. And what we have here is another species of Artemisia, another plant related to the sagebrushes. Artemisia is also the genus for the sagebrushes, which are woody-based shrubs. So this plant, the mugwort, is characterized by variable leaf structures, kind of like on a lot of other Artemisia species. So we get these often upright, sometimes slightly leaning, these leaning stalks here. These plants are colony forming. They form root clones. So these plants will spread from root runners that run underneath the soil, and then sprouts will come up and produce new stalks. So when we're looking at silver wormwood or silver mugwort, we're looking for quite narrow leaves in profile and very narrowly lobed, especially lower down on the plant. As you can see here, the leaves are lobed narrowly, very narrowly lobed leaves, and they're pinnately lobed. The lobation's mostly on the sides. And as you can see here, hopefully you can see here, you can see these leaves are alternately arranged on the stem. So they grow alternating down the stem. The leaves that are higher up are usually a little bit shorter and not quite as prominently lobed as you see here. And some of the uppermost leaves, like that, might not be lobed at all. And that's kind of characteristic in a lot of Artemisia plants. Even some of the sagebrushes act the same way. But you notice that the leaves are kind of a lightish green, sometimes a grayish green. And the top side, let's see, top side might have a very light pubescence, but if you look underneath, the underside of the leaves are white and have a little light pubescence or fuzziness, like Artemisia douglasiana, the Douglas mugwort. Well, like I said, I spotlighted a couple months ago. So these ones growing in the shade tend to be more of a mint green color. However, the ones out in the sun can often have more of a grayish appearance as well. And the grayish appearance is common in plants that grow in often dry locations. to ward off the effects of the sun. Sometimes the color helps to repel the sunlight and reflect it back. So this one's growing out more in the sun. And with like a lot of species of Artemisia, the inflorescence, or the structure that provides the flowers, is a long, often narrow panicle. In other words, a cluster of flowers, or in this case, since they're sunflower family plants, flower heads. So each flower head is small, kind of greenish brown, and will turn into these little tiny speckled seeds towards the late fall months. So right now we're going into later September, so these plants are well into their bloom. Here is a nice colony right here of the Artemisia ludoviciana, subspecies incompta. They can form some pretty dense populations, but again, you notice that they normally don't get quite as tall as the Douglas mugwort. But here they are. Like I said, they're generally upright. Sometimes these flowers, sometimes the flower heads weigh them down a little bit, so sometimes they'll kind of droop a little bit. But we got a nice population of it here in this near this little meadow area. So alongside trails up in the mountains is where you're going to find subspecies incompta. The other subspecies are found more in the lower elevations and some towards the desert, and those would require, I believe, for me, a more subspecies specific spotlight when I am to come across those. But they like grasslands and meadows, especially on the edge. They seem to like the edge of trails, sometimes disturbed sites, and areas near the trees. So I'm not seeing much of it here. It's mostly buckwheat and grass. But as we start getting more trees popping up, we're also getting more mugwort popping up. As you see, we're getting over here. So they like montane meadows and woodland edges. So these plants can be locally common here in Southern California. You can see these plants swaying in the breeze. These are just about all Artemisia ludoviciana. I'd say we're at an elevation of about 5,800 feet right here, but you'll find them above 6,000 feet and down a little ways. But they can be quite common here in Southern California. I've seen them on quite a few occasions. Always got confused as to what subspecies we had, but now I know that the subspecies higher up in the mountains is the subspecies incompta. So we're going to come across another little population right here. And one thing to know about this plant, I forgot to mention, it is a perennial. Now sometimes they might die back to their root, but the root system itself is perennial. The root system will persist. The stems might die back, but the root persists and will resprout in the spring. So they can be winter dormant, especially where it's colder and snowier. So there you have it. Silver wormwood, or silver mugwort. Artemisia ludoviciana, subspecies incompta. Almost called it dracunculus, which also grows here. So that plant is also here too. But Artemisia dracunculus, the dragon sagewort, aka wild tarragon, which is the wild ancestor of the cultivated tarragon, but I don't think ours would taste as good. That one also grows in the area, a lot of times in the same environments, and will integrate. Fortunately, I'm not seeing it right this second, because I do want to contrast it because it is a somewhat similar species. However, it grows a brighter green, sometimes gets a little bit taller, and doesn't have that soft woodsy fragrance smell, the sagebrushy smell that Artemisia ludoviciana has. Just gently rubbing a stem does have that fragrance. In my experience, dragon sagewort or tarragon, wild tarragon, kind of has a bitter smell, and it doesn't have that fragrance. When you're hiking alongside the trails here, keep an eye out for these guys. Beautiful silver wormwood. Been wanting to spotlight this one for a while. Now that I finally took the time to figure out what subspecies is the one found in the mountains, now I have it. So keep an eye on them for these beautiful wooded areas here in the mountains, especially the edges of the oaks and conifers here in the Laguna Mountains. Beautiful plant, fragrant, and that will do it for my spotlight on plants. Artemisia ludoviciana, subspecies incompta, mountain mugwort, or silver mugwort, silver wormwood. Thanks for watching my spotlight. I'll see you on another video.